Welcome to the Affirm Wellness Podcast, where we will explore the many facets of wellness. In each session, we'll dive into inspiring stories, give expert tips, and practical advice to help you live a healthier, more fulfilling life. This episode takes a closer look at how everyday communication shapes the quality of our relationships. We highlight patterns that foster connection, like clear communication, emotional honesty, and active listening, while also addressing habits that can create distance, including defensiveness, avoidance, and criticism. As you listen, you're invited to reflect on your own communication patterns and explore how small, intentional changes can lead to stronger, more connected relationships. How are you feeling today, Bhavani?
Today I'm feeling content. I'm feeling hopeful, and just overall, I'm in a good space. What about you?
Good. I like the color that you're wearing today.
Thank
It's
you.
really pretty.
And I like that you're wearing one of our Firm Wellness
T-shirts.
t-shirts.
Yeah, one of my favorite ones. I love coffee, so figured this was suiting for today. But today I'm feeling curious and happy and like you, hopeful about things moving forward. I'm really excited about today's conversation, as always, and ready to get started.
Yeah, we've been having some pretty good conversations.
Yeah, we
So
have.
um, it's a great segue into what we're talking about today: healthy communication styles and how
Absolutely.
to have great conversations that strengthen relationship and not sabotage relationships. So I'm excited about
Absolutely.
this conversation.
I say a lot of times in therapy that healthy communication is the foundation of relationships.
Yes.
I don't care if it's an intimate relationship or friendship, family. Healthy communication is the foundation of those healthy relationships and can make or break a relationship.
It definitely can.
So I think it's important to kind of talk about some of the most common communication styles. So I'm just going to go over them really briefly. And then I think that'll kind of help us reflect on uh, communication styles that we kind of naturally use on a day to day. And then where does that come from? Where we learn that from? So, passive communication style prioritizes the needs of others over your own needs, and then also the goal is to avoid conflict with that passive communication style. An example is your needs matter over mine, right? Aggressive communication style prioritizes your own needs at the expense of others. And that an example is my needs matter more than yours. So it's the opposite of the passive communication style. Passive aggressive communicator avoids confrontation and they subtly express their anger. An example of that is I won't say it, but I'll show it. Assertive communication style is one of the most common and its most balanced and effective communication style. And this key traits for assertive communication style is clear, direct communication that's respectful. And we're pretty much saying here an example of that is both of our needs matter, not just mine, not just yours, but both of our needs matter. So, well, Amy, which communication style would you say that you naturally use, and what communication styles did you learn growing up? Is it different than what you naturally use now, or the same, or kind of tell us a little bit about that?
I think my communication style sometimes depends on the relationship I have with the person, but I would say 98% of the time my communication style is assertive. I'm very direct and I'm very honest about how I'm feeling. uh, I am more cautious about, based on the relationships, how direct I am, and more mindful about the my approach to having a conversation with someone or the way I communicate with someone. But for the most part, I would say I'm assertive. And growing up, I'm Nigerian American, but growing up in a Nigerian household is a lot of loud talking. And I'm not a very loud person, but it's a lot of loud talking. And if you were to come into the home, it seems like you're fighting or there's some drama going on, but it's really just passionate talking and storytelling and a lot of laughter and things like that. So, um, were there some direct conversations? Yes, but I would also say some were passive aggressive in nature as well. And I could pick up on some of those things, but for the most part, I learned from my environment, but also innately, I feel like I'm just an honest, assertive person. I feel like once you're able to communicate very clear, concise, that it helps relationships flourish better than being passive or passive aggressive. I don't think I've ever been passive. Maybe passive aggressive in relationships, but I would say most of the time, I would say it's assertive. What about you?
Naturally, I am an assertive person, but I had to grow into that because I used to be really quiet and reserved and didn't say a whole lot. Um, and I would speak up when I felt passionate about things, but it was mainly in my family dynamic. But at school and around friends and things like that, I was the quiet person. And so now I'm assertive. I generally will speak up when I feel like I need to speak up, but I'm very diplomatic in my approach. So I'm not rude or anything like that. I can get points across, but be kind and professional and considerate of other people's feelings, to a degree. We'll talk about that a little bit later because I also have limits and boundaries with that too. Growing up, there were 5 kids in my house. My mom was the main, I want to say, driver of the house. I am the second oldest of 5 children, and things were really chaotic growing up in my household. But there was also a lot of love and laughter and kindness. My mom was the driver. My dad was like the more so the humorous kind of person, but he was also the driver too. But mom's presence was there quite a bit, and I remember her being more of a passive aggressive communicator. She was always like, telling us things with directly and with passion. And so I kind of learned that from her, especially as being the oldest or the second to the oldest, but the oldest of the girls. I had to a lot of times be assertive with kind of getting my points across and things like that. And so I think that's where I kind of get it from now, having to be assertive to really get my point across in chaotic environments. And so now I don't have such a huge issue with doing that now. I also realized too with not that my mom intended any harm or anything like that with kind of using some of her communication styles, but I haven't adopted that style with my children because, I just want to use a bit of a more diplomatic, softer approach with them so that they model that behavior as they grow older and grow into adults and things like that, more healthier communication styles. You still get your point across with healthier communication styles without all the yelling and cussing and fussing and things like that that people sometimes feel like they have to do.
Yeah, because you have to really be intentional about that, especially you want to make changes when it comes to your
Absolutely.
communication style, because you'll fall back into those patterns. We'll talk
Absolutely.
about that some more later.
Yeah, yeah. So, do you attend to express your needs clearly, or do you expect for people to kind of know and read your mind?
Definitely don't expect people to read my mind. When you asked that question, I thought about cognitive distortions, and there's a cognitive distortions that's about mind reading
Mhm.
and fortune telling.
Mhm.
And so I try to stay away from mind reading and fortune telling. If you don't tell me directly,
Mhm.
well, baby, this is how I feel about you, and this is what you did. I'm not gonna believe anything
Mhm.
that anybody else says or what my mind is saying unless you tell me
Mhm.
clearly. That's a
Mhm.
decision I've made for myself. Like if somebody comes and tells me, "Oh, Deshauna said this about you," I'm like, "Oh, really? Okay." But if you haven't come to tell me, it doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
I'll take the information in, but it doesn't process or sit well in my spirit or a spirit at all.
Yeah.
If you don't come to tell me directly, so I don't ever guess or assume anything that anybody has to say. And so, yeah, I would say no, I like, I express my needs and, my expectations very clearly. You're gonna know how I feel,
Yeah.
right? You know
Yeah.
that about me. You're gonna know how I
Yeah,
feel. You're gonna
for
know what I
sure.
think. You're never gonna have to guess when it comes to me.
Mhm.
And if you have any questions or concerns, I'm easy to, talk to and
Mhm.
get information from if needed.
Mhm. Mhm.
What about you? What would you say?
I don't necessarily volunteer the information, but if someone asks me, I'll be honest with them about how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, if something offended me, some recommendations for us moving forward, because they are recommendations. They don't have to take the recommendations. But I do that directly because again, growing up as the second to the oldest, being in certain environments, like I worked in the criminal justice system as a counselor. I was a coordinator of treatment court programs and things like that. So I had to use a lot of direct communication styles and working in those kind of environments. So that's just kind of adopted. I've adopted those kind of communication styles in my day to day life, whether it's personal or professional. So I don't expect for anybody to read my mind or know how I'm feeling or know what I need. It's my responsibility to communicate that. And then also, I also try to avoid assumptions with other people.
Mhm.
So I am really good at asking somebody, how do they feel? Or what did you mean by that? Did you intend to do that? I
Mhm.
try to ask follow-up questions so that I don't assume and I don't create unnecessary drama.
Mhm, mhm. And it's funny that you say that because, how do you respond when you feel misunderstood or hurt?
I can admit that I'm a sensitive person.
Mhm.
I am a sensitive person, and so I do experience the frustration, the disappointment, the confusion, and sometimes I will seek to to explain myself depending on the relationship. If it's a close relationship, especially with the children, with my kids or my husband or my family, I'll try to explain myself so that maybe they can understand. But then if I'm dealing with somebody that is not eh, is not a good communicator, then I'll shut down. I won't necessarily try to express myself to try to help them understand because I feel like what's the point? What's the purpose, right? But I mean, I'm a sensitive person, so I get sad and all of the things and have to try to go through that internal process of working through it myself.
Mhm.
Especially if it's not feasible for me to talk to the other person
And I
about
think it's important to have that self-awareness that, hey, when this happens, it's hurtful, and so I need
it.
to be mindful of that.
Absolutely.
And for me, I would say it also depends on the relationship. For me, if I'm close to the person and if I've had good conversation with that person, if that person is open to receiving feedback or um just engaging with,
Yeah.
then yeah, hey Deshauna, what did you think about this? How do you feel about that? I'm forever asking questions because I know that you'll give me
Yeah.
an honest feedback.
Yeah.
But there's some people that I've tried to be assertive with or direct with that they kind of talk in circles and things like that, and that gives me a headache. And so I don't push it too much. I'll still ask and I'll still try to get clarity. But if they're not willing to give clarity, because maybe they're not clear within themselves, then I don't force it. And
Mhm.
so I would say that if I don't know you at all, I don't really care
Mhm.
about getting
Mhm.
clarity from you.
Yeah.
If I don't have a relationship that's a close relationship or a relationship that's important to me, I don't really need the clarity. I'll create my own clarity for myself and be able to let go.
Yeah.
But I do communicate with people that I want to continue having healthy relationships with, and there is some people I set boundaries with. I don't communicate with them as much or don't communicate with them at all.
Yeah, they're just not sometimes they're just not healthy communicators and it just cause a lot of stress.
Yes.
And because it's happened over, not just one time, but over and over and over again, you kind of know.
Yes.
What would it look like to communicate with honesty and care with others?
Um, one of the things that I promote is seeking safety.
Mhm.
And so one of the things I think is important to remember is that, when I see safety within myself, then it projects and it comes out to other relationships.
Yeah.
And so because I believe in safety for myself, I'm always mindful of safety for other people. So I would say like, making sure there's safety and healthy communication and honesty and healthy communication. So if I'm honest and I show care, I'm creating safety with that relationship. And so I consider what you're thinking.
Yeah.
I'm listening. In the book Sacred Rest by Sandra Dalton Smith, she talks about that we have two ears and one mouth for a reason, but oftentimes we are talking more than we're actually listening.
Yeah.
And that's one of the skills that I've developed, naturally is innately who I am, but also as a therapist, you get to train that listening skill very, very strongly. And so I would say, listening before I speak and not listening to give an answer, or listening to be defensive, but listen to actually hear what the person has to say.
Mhm.
Whether I agree with it or not, that's not the time to make that judgment. It's really just listening to actually hear what the person is
Sure.
saying, not just um, hearing noises and stuff like that and trying to be defensive and stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. And then also, I want to highlight something that also helps me. It's called the wise mind. So there's emotional mind, reasonable mind, and wise mind. So
Mhm.
the emotional mind oftentimes wants to uh, act based on emotions. And
Mhm.
with emotions, you can be very impulsive. And I would describe somebody that's emotional as somebody that will burn your clothes and put it in the pile or slash your tires based on their emotions. And then somebody that is um reasonable, they're very logical. So they're very calculated. So I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I call them the serial murderers and people that are very calculated, and they know exactly what they're gonna do, and they're gonna attack you without you even knowing that they're attacking you, and they can be manipulative. And then and that's at the extremes, because we all can be emotional and reasonable. We all are logical and emotional. But at the extreme, these are what that looks like.
Sure.
And so the wise mind balances emotion and logic. So your emotions are going to make you impulsive, and the logic is going to either tell you what the healthy thing to do or unhealthy thing to do. And so we want to merge the two and come up with wise decisions and wise choices. And so the wise mind is basically balancing the emotional mind and the reasonable mind or the logical mind to come up with a healthier decision making um, technique. And so I use that a lot when it comes to conversation. I use my wise mind versus emotional mind or my reasonable mind. Because if I use my emotional mind, I could curse you out. I could be disrespectful to you. But if I use if I use my logical mind, I can be very calculated. And, in my mind, I'm thinking about ways to get back at you and things like that. And so I balance that and come up with a wise mind instead.
Yeah, in therapy, one of my favorite things to do is role play because, we're always dealing with different circumstances with relationships, work, family, intimate relationships. And, sometimes we're left on that cliffhanger, like, what should we have said? Or what will we say when we do sit down and have a conversation with that person, with that boss, with that husband, with that girlfriend, whomever it is? And so I'll say, well, at the time that the circumstance happened, the situation happened, what did you say and what did you do? Oh, well, I told them about themselves, and well, how did you feel after? Well, Austin, I didn't feel so good about it. And what happened to the relationship as a result of that? Well, we're not talking to each other right now. Or, I got written up because I said something bad at work or whatever. And so then when we kind of dissect that situation, we'll say, okay, well, how can we say something different or do something different to produce a different outcome? And so when you talk about using your reasonable mind and your wise mind and looking at the facts and not emotions have a place.
Hmm.
We can be sad, mad, glad, or whatever, but we need to be mindful of how we're responding to certain situations based on those emotions, right? So for me, I know if I'm infuriated, if I'm really, really mad about something, I need to go somewhere and sit down
Take a step
and
back.
cool off
Mhm.
because I know that I'm not going to be acting like my best self if I'm responding to things while I'm feeling that way. So we talk about that and then we role play how can we show up differently next time utilizing our reasonable mind and our wise mind, and the outcomes are always different when they come back to session. They'll say, well, okay, well, I sat down with the person, I talked to the person, and I said XYZ, I told them how I felt, and then I listened to them and let them respond without talking over them and all that stuff, and then we were able to come to some reasonable solutions, right? So that's one of my favorite things to do is to role play,
Mhm.
because we get to again dissect the situation and find out how we could make improvement.
Definitely. That's good.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I don't know, I don't think I said this earlier, but sometimes it's when you talk about seeking safety,
Hmm.
removing yourself from certain situations when the circumstances kind of get too volatile. You're arguing, it's not getting anywhere. Like, I love a healthy debate. I don't mind at all, because being too agreeable with someone is not healthy. You're always agreeing with what someone says. You're scared to debate and things like that. I love a healthy debate, but when it starts to become volatile and counterproductive, it's just not good. And I'll separate myself from the situation.
That's why I made that rule about for myself.
Yeah.
Religion and politics.
Yeah.
I don't
Stay out of
debate
Yeah.
those type of conversations.
Yeah.
If people are doing it, I'm around,
Yeah.
but I don't engage with it because I can't convince you to believe what I
Thank
believe.
you.
You're not going to convince me to believe
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
you believe,
Yeah.
and so I'd rather just keep it neutral, keep it copacetic, and let's move on with our lives. And so that's another way when it comes to communication style that I am mindful of what I'm willing to participate in and what I'm not willing to participate.
Yes, or telling somebody how to live their life.
Yes.
I give you suggestions and recommendations. You have to ask, because I'm just not going to volunteer it. Again, in my professional world as a therapist, that's a little different, because someone's coming in and they are seeking your counseling and your suggestions and things like that. But if you're coming to me and talking to me about something, you may just be communicating an issue to me or concern to me, but I wait until you ask if for my advice. I don't necessarily always give it in my personal world. And so I say all of that to say, with communicating with honesty and care, for how that shows up in my world, and how I illustrate that is by trusting myself. That I trust myself to be honest and open about how I'm feeling, and eliminating the fear of being judged, or how that other person is going to receive what I'm saying, because I know that I'm delivering those things with care. I'm considering the other person. So if I'm sitting and I'm being honest with you and open with you about maybe a situation that caused a conflict between us, or something else, whatever it is, and you take it the wrong way, I'm not going to take ownership of that, because I know that I delivered it with care and I was honest. A lot of people say, keep it real, and then you keep it real,
They can't
and they
take it,
can't they can't handle the honesty, right? And you keeping it real. And the other thing that I want to say, caring about how others think don't always means agreeing with what they say or do, but instead finding kind and compassionate ways to address certain situations. The outcome may not always mean that we're shaking hands, we're singing kumbaya at the at the end of the conversation, but that's okay too. At least I tried my best to help resolve the circumstance.
Yeah, because the whole goal is to strengthen the relationship and not to sabotage.
That's it.
But but it has to be two willing participants.
Thank you. Thank you. And I have to be the change I want to see too. That's why sometimes I stay in the thick of things. I try not to be the person who was always going to be avoided and run away from certain situations, but I also see those warning signs, and I'm like, stop, Deshauna. This person is not able to engage in a conversation like this in a mature way. Let's get out of here. Maybe later we can come back and we can have this discussion, but now it's just not the right time.
Yeah.
So
Great conversation.
absolutely.
I'm glad we have great communication as well.
Yes, we could not have made it this far as business partners, as friends,
10 years,
if we didn't have good communication. And we're not perfect. There's some things that I've learned from you. There's some things that you've learned from me. But I appreciate how we show up, and we just try to do better every year.
Yes.
So the takeaway for this session is that healthy relationships are shaped by intentional communication. When you become aware of your patterns and choose clarity, honesty, and understanding, you create space for deeper connection and less miscommunication.
The challenge for this session is to practice one intentional shift in your communication. Pause before responding. Use I statements instead of blame. An example of that would be, I feel upset when you interrupt me because I don't feel heard. Another example is, I feel happy when we spend time together because it means a lot to me. Reflect back on what you heard before replying. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe. Take care.
Thank you for joining us. Remember, wellness is not a destination, but a process, and every step you take matters. Until next time, stay grounded, stay connected, and keep prioritizing your well being.